Nikki Haley making the decision that she was suspending her campaign. I love the way that the Tennessean characterized this. And I don't normally, I go there. I do so you don't have to. There are a few occupational hazards in this job. One of them I talk about quite often, that I watch organizations like #NeverCNN, so you don't have to, because it's a part of the job. We have to observe what leftists are doing in order to understand their tactics, understand they're crazy, and I take the hit so you don't have to. And I do the same thing with the Tennessean. And I actually have to pay for that because they're behind a paywall. I love the way that they characterized Biden v. Trump. And this was actually, the Tennessean regurgitated it, but it came from their parent company. I think it's Gannett, if I'm not mistaken. And USA Today. Susan Page writing for USA Today. The headline, a rematch nobody wanted. Biden v. Trump, 2024. I'm going to start with a simple question. Is it a rematch that you wanted? Because I'll tell you, it's a rematch I wanted. It's a rematch that I support. And it is the easiest path for sanity to return to the White House in 2024 and beyond, considering that Joe Biden is such a weak president and even a weaker candidate, and Donald Trump, by many estimations, would have, certainly absent COVID-19 and all that went with it, would have easily cruised to re-election in 2020. And what with all of the electioneering and shenanigans that went on, much of which went on because of COVID-19, we all believe that Donald Trump would have been the victor. But he was not. And because of that, it's a rematch that I very much want to see, and a rematch nobody wanted. Who are you talking to, Susan Page? You're not talking to me.
But Biden's won the last 5 polls. The last 5.
Oh, my gosh. That guy. Do you have that available?
I don't. I should have pulled it up.
Oh, my goodness. I
tried to find the version that I saw yesterday where he told them to stop reading the New York Times, and I can't find it now.
No, it was right on the back end of that quote, right? Where he said, you guys,
exactly.
It was the same quote. It was the same clip where Joe Biden's kind of half whispering and half, it's one of those weird things that he's done over the last several years. He did not do this back in the day when he was sane or was not dementia-addled, but he does it now where he does this half whisper deal. You guys, I've won the last 5 polls. I have it. I have to pull up my X machine in order to get to it. It's creepy, to say the least. And
it's
Joe
also
Biden,
hilarious to watch him, pitch slap one of his biggest supporters.
Well, and here's the reality. None of that's true. There is, on no planet is that true. There is no 5-poll series that Joe Biden has won in the last whatever amount of time. During this election cycle, certainly. But Joe Biden understands and believes, and this is a part of the problem. Without the mainstream media propping up Democrats wouldn't exist. It will be a theme of the show today between noon and 3. The manner in which the mainstream media responded to what, for many of us, was a fait accompli, and that was that Donald Trump finally and completely dispatched of Nikki Haley. They can't believe it. They can't understand why anybody would go out and vote for Donald Trump. After all, democracy is on the ballot, they tell us. Democracy is on the ballot. I heard it over and over again. My wife brought me in to our, we call it the Bob room because of her dad, but it's like our little sunroom area where we've got a television out there, and she was watching a program. She said, I wanted you to see this, and it's this woman from Texas coming out of the polls, and it's one of these standard exit poll interviews. Well, do you mind if we ask you a few questions? That kind of thing. And they're talking to the woman, and they said, well, how did you vote? And she said, well, today I voted for Joe Biden, and I'm not really that excited, but, I feel like democracy is on the ballot. And I genuinely don't know what they're talking about. I don't know what they mean. The only explanation. I mean, they're just regurgitating garbage that they hear from these talking head nonsensical networks that don't have anything nice to say about Joe Biden. They know that they can't justify anything that Joe Biden's done as president of the United States. They know that his presidency has been a disaster. And so what? They're left with democracy is on the ballot? What do you... I'm not going to get overly excited when I say this, but may I suggest that democracy is the ballot? Democracy is the ballot.
But it won't be if Trump wins. Our ability to vote will go away.
Democracy's on the ballot. What does that... I mean, genuinely speaking, surely there are a few liberals that are not so dumb that they can't use a telephone, that you can't call me, and I will give you all of the grace in the world to explain to me what that means. Democracy is on the ballot. I mean, I know a lot of times I ask rhetorical questions in a fashion by which you know the real answer to them, and we do so to mainly mock liberals or mock the media or whatnot. I genuinely don't understand what they mean, except that they are saying that they're insinuating that Donald Trump is an authoritarian dictator that will not relinquish power once he gets it. Bell,
yep,
you follow these things much as the next guy. Do you see any holes in the argument that the liberals are making that Donald Trump is an authoritarian dictator type that will not relinquish power once he gets it?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is they said that last time, and he did give up power.
Oh, really? Really? Is that what happened?
Now, I will admit he didn't. He was not hyperbolic about it. And that is it's a personality trait with him, is hyperbole. But he ain't the president anymore because he left. He gave up power.
Democracy is on the ballot. John writes in and says, we'll have to wait for Brian Wilson to confirm or deny these 5 Joe Biden polls. That's true. Brian Wilson and I have talked much about my disdain for polling, and Brian digs into the polling, and I don't begrudge him that. I mean, I get it. I understand where he's coming from on it. So it's not like we're at loggerheads over the issue. I tend to ignore polls in March because I know how much changes between March and April and May. I understand that it's a snapshot in time. I get all of those things. We were talking about it last night in our big show, which I want to get to before I get too far away from it. Thank you so much. I want to thank each and every one of you. I had never been to the Nashville Palace. I know that it is somewhat of a Nashville institution, been there for a long time. If you've never been, it's right next to, have you ever been, Bell? Right next to Willie Nelson and Friends.
I was there last night.
And Cooters.
Yeah.
You know, Cooters is over there.
Yeah.
And I've told myself I need to get to Cooters. Cooter, the best character name in television history.
Dukes of Hazzard. He was their mechanic friend, right?
That's exactly right. Had his tow truck, and Cooter would, drive around Hazard County, helping people out when he could.
Anytime they busted up the General Lee, he fixed it for them.
Oh, yeah. Cooter had it in his shop. Jiffy Quick. He was taking care of business over there. Uncle Jesse. He'd help out old Uncle Jesse when he needed it. Daisy. Obviously, anybody in town, anybody in the county would help out Daisy.
Of course.
Boss Hogg. He wouldn't help out Cooter. No. Sheriff Roscoe Pico. I'd love to Dukes of Hazzard when I was a kid.
It's amazing how many people that were on that show were also on Andy Griffith.
Yeah. I mean, Denver Pyle, who played Uncle Jesse, obviously was
on a lot.
He was head of the Darlin family.
Yes, he was
the patriarch of the
guy
Darlin
that played
family.
Boss Hogg was on there. Guy that played Roscoe P. Coltrane.
Pete Best.
And
I think that's right. Is it Pete Best?
No, he was the drummer in the Beatles.
Well, I'm gonna figure this out because I want to. James Best. I think his last name was Best. I'm gonna find out.
I think you're right.
I met him one time. There was a Mayberry reunion day in Alabama, and I had an opportunity to meet him. And what? Hold on a second. 4515 just said something to me. On the super text line, the Members Nutrition super text line, we have to record scratch and stop the show. Is that real? Thank you. Jerry Reed built Nashville Palace.
Did he?
I don't know. 4515 says he did.
When did Jerry die?
Cooter, Sally says Cooter is a Democrat from North Carolina. Cooter was, I think Cooter started out as a Democrat from North Carolina, and he became a Republican. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that's true, Sally, but one way or the other. And Sally also reminds us that it was James Best and not Pete Best. Pete Best, as Bell mentioned, was in fact the original drummer of the Beatles before he got replaced by Ringo Starr, and that's very sad because Pete Best did not get his comeuppance. James was a fabulous actor, and he appeared on a couple of occasions. He was he played on Andy Griffith. He was a guitar player.
Yeah, he was part of what was the band?
Oh, it's like Jimmy Beat and the. Something with the Jimmy Fleet and the band with the beat or something like that.
Jimmy Fleet and the band with the beat. But he, when John Schneider was in here one time and I asked him if Best actually played guitar, and he said no, because if you watch those Andy Griffith shows, the guitar playing is so good and so interesting that
you never see his head.
It'll pull you out of the story.
What? James Best did not play guitar.
He did not play guitar. That is not him playing, though there are full shots of him with his hand on the neck. So somebody taught him just enough to get by for the shot, but according to John Schneider, he does not play guitar.
I was in a theatrical performance one time where I had to learn to fake playing the bassoon.
Oh, that must have been difficult.
It was, actually.
It's a good thing they didn't stick you with a tuba.
I had to play. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. We got more important things to talk about. Cooter was a Republican. I want to believe that, whether or not it was true. One way or the other, it was a great event at Nashville Palace. I just hope that Jerry Reed did, in fact, build a Nashville Palace. He was a part of the original group. 5042 says Jerry Reed was a part of the original group that built the palace. Randy Travis was a cook and a dishwasher at Nashville Palace, and they dined hee-haw there? What? I don't know what that means. Well, one way or the other, it was a great event. Thank you all for coming out. We were on the front side of the Nashville Palace and absolutely adored it. It was, the room was absolutely packed. Obviously, Dan Mandis was there. Brian Wilson was there. Matt Murphy, yours truly, was there. Chris Hand was there, and many, many others. And thank all of you for stopping by. We gave out a lot of swag. We had a lot of fun, and we appreciate each of you for being a part of it, and we'll do it again very soon. We certainly hope. Yes, Cooter's real name was Ben Jones, and Ben Jones he did get into politics, and I do believe that he was a Republican, if I'm not mistaken. Brian says, speaking of Cooters, I think, well, I'm not going to read that, Brian. I almost got caught. Bad man. Bad.
Wait a minute. You said practically the same thing talking about Dolly.
Well, yeah. I mean, that I never.
He said, I think Daisy was my first indication that he was heterosexual.
Well, you said it nicer than he said it. Yes, Daisy Duke was quite something back in the day. I had already established where I was with regard to the type of what I said was that I do not believe that homosexuality is quote unquote a choice, because I never chose to be heterosexual, but I remember the moment where I knew what type of woman I liked. And that's the moment that I saw Dolly Parton. Daisy Duke, all good, all well and good. Dolly Parton was more my style. That said, I can perfectly appreciate what you're talking about right there. And I'm thankful for it. I remember Dukes of Hazzard was the first time, while we're talking on the subject, Cooters and all that, I remember when I was like 12 or 13 years old, Dukes of Hazzard had one of those very special episodes where, like, Boss Hogg he was the bad guy, but he was never the real bad guy. He was the goofy bad guy. He was the foil. He was the heel.
Yeah, he's the guy that got in the way of them solving the actual problem that the bad guys presented.
Right, but then there were real bad guys, and there was one episode, I remember this distinctly. I was watching, it was a Friday night. I think it came on Friday nights, and I was watching, and I'm having a good time watching them jump things and doing all that, and they tied Roscoe up, Roscoe P. Coltrane, and they were going to kill Boss Hogg. And I remember Roscoe getting to the walkie-talkie and begging the Duke boys and it turned, because, Roscoe was just a goof.
Yeah.
And when he begged the Duke boys to save his fat little buddy, and he said, I know y'all don't like him. I know he's mean to you, but he's like my best friend or whatever, and it got real emotional. And I remember crying, and my brother picked on me for crying because Roscoe P. Coltrane liked Boss Hogg so much.
What's your brother's name?
Brian.
Brian. Good job, Brian. You justified.
Shut your mouth. You and Brian, you're a lot alike. Now that I think about it. All right, we've lots to dissect over the election results last evening. Trump was huge. Biden was absent for most of the evening last night. Kyrsten Sinema is now out, which helps greatly Kari Lake in Arizona and helps the chances for the Republican Party taking over the United States Senate. We'll discuss that. Speaking of out, obviously Nikki Haley is out, and it's the rematch that I certainly do want, and that is Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, and we'll talk about how that shakes out and how democracy is not on the ballot. Democracy is actually the ballot. We'll discuss that in a moment.